Good morning. These are exciting times. Congratulations here on the results of your EU Parliament elections. You may not know this, but that is a shot that has rung out all the way across the Atlantic. In the United States of America, we have been paying close attention because we see the tides of politics and policy, more importantly, that is changing here in Europe, and that portends change not just later on for your national elections, but around the world. And it is such a welcome development. I'm so excited for you here in the European Union. I remember going back, several years ago, 5-10 years ago, and talking with people, many of the people in this room, about fighting back against the alarmist climate narrative and the horrible energy policies and policies even beyond energy, but regarding our personal freedom, the horrible policies that were being imposed in the name of fighting climate change. And people would say, James, there's not much we can do. You don't understand. Europe is different than America. In America, the Heartland Institute, CFACT, CEI, other organizations are fighting back and getting some attention for this. But here in Europe, there's nothing really we can do. People's minds have already been brainwashed. We can't get any traction. And I would tell people, don't give up, because whether we're talking America or Europe or really anywhere else in the world, people are intelligent. People are discerning. And it may be that here in Europe, for quite some time, you've had the bureaucracy and the media that tell you everyone in the world, all the scientists agree that we're facing a climate crisis, but it's not true. And if it's not true, the truth will get out. And I started seeing some change just recently in the past year or two before these elections that were just announced, the results that were just announced. Last spring, I was invited to Warsaw. And it was really exciting for me because the Prime Minister of Poland at the time, Mateusz Morawiecki, contacted Heartland, contacted me, and said, we'd like you to come over as part of a small delegation and meet with the Prime Minister. Meet with some of the heads of the departments in the Polish government. Meet with some of the non-governmental organizations that are so influential here in Poland. Share with us what you've learned on energy, environment, climate, and other topics. And let's talk about ways that we can fight back against what's being imposed upon us by the European Union. And Prime Minister Morawiecki gave our small group, I believe it was an hour and a half, and we were told, wow, that's amazing. Normally you get 20 minutes with the Prime Minister and that's it. But he wanted to know what are the best strategies to fight back against the European Union Parliament about the provisions that are forcing coal mining, coal production to a halt in Poland. What are we going to do? And his attitude was somewhat defeatist at the beginning of the meeting, but afterwards he was fired up. And meeting with some of the people in the Polish government, they were fired up. And in the time since, here in Austria, you have two members of the European Parliament that have reached out to us at Heartland that have been working with us. Harold Wilimski. By the way, I saw two of his posters, billboards on the drive over here from the hotel. Like, yeah, that's my friend Harold. Outstanding. You've got a great one there. Yes, please. And Roman Heider. And these two gentlemen, representing Austria, the Freedom Party, Identity and Democracy, in the EU Parliament, they came to Chicago and met with us here at Heartland, and we strategized for a full day on the climate policies, the energy policies, and also how do we build momentum for sound policy. Then they invited me to Strasbourg for a meeting of the EU Parliament in, I believe it was March. It was February or March. It was March. And they told me, look, there is a bill that is being proposed. This would require all of Europe to get to net zero carbon dioxide emissions by 2050. And they said, look, they already have the votes. That's the disappointing thing. But we're making progress. I mean, our voices are getting heard. We want you to come here, James. And at the very least, we want you to speak to the Parliament. We want you to tell them what you've learned in America, what you've learned with the Heartland Institute, with CFACT, with CEI, and other organizations. Tell us not only the science, but also the economics and the policy implications. Let them know how the people in Europe will turn against them if they push this. Again, it's a foregone conclusion. They have the votes, but we want you to give that talk. So at Harold and Roman's request, I came to Strasbourg and spoke, and it was quite an amazing time. They set up meetings with members of the Hungarian delegation who were the deciding factor. I was told they're the group that's putting the bill over the top. And they pretty much agree with us, but they're afraid to stick their necks out on the topic. Roman Haider and Harold Wilimski made sure that there was quite a bit of press from Hungary there for my presentation that they had set up, and press from around the European Union. I gave my talk. I gave the best material and information I could. Went back to the United States. Oh, by the way, they arranged for dinners and private one-on-one talks with the Hungarians and other members of parliament. And an amazing thing happened. About 2 weeks afterwards, I was in Denver, Colorado, meeting with one of our friends at Heartland. And the person I was meeting with stepped out of the room for a moment. So I pulled out my cell phone to see what the news of the day was. And in the United States of America, all the way across the Atlantic Ocean, right at the very top, I see an article from the Associated Press with a headline that read something like this: "In stunning move, European Parliament pulls net zero bill." Think about that. This was a done deal. I was told basically we were here just to let them know in advance these are going to be the consequences. But the message got across. The message got across to members of parliament. And when the European Union Parliament, in a rare show of discerning voting and implementing sound policy, when they made that decision, it reverberated all the way across the Atlantic. With your recent EU Parliament elections, where you have gains from the true conservatives here in Europe, again, in the United States of America, you are an inspiration to us. So thank you for all that you do here. Thank you for everyone in this room that's been a part of that. And what's really quite compelling to me is that when I look at the media reports, they tell us that there are two main factors that have been driving the vote here. One is immigration. Two is fighting the green transition. That is amazing. Just 5-6 years ago, I was told that we can't even talk on this topic. We get no traction. People are brainwashed. And yet all around the world, including here in Europe, we see a change. Now, from America, a few things to keep in mind just as we're looking forward, as I think that momentum is going to continue. I get this question all the time from my European friends. Who's going to win in November? You heard it here. Donald Trump is coming back. Donald Trump is going to win. And I remember coming here in 2017, 2018, and people saying, well, and conservatives, and saying that, well, yeah, but I don't like Donald Trump. Yeah, Donald Trump scares me. It's funny, for the European Parliament elections that just occurred, all that you would hear in the United States media was that, here in Austria, Identity and Democracy, Freedom Party, these are fascists. These are the far right. These are modern day Nazis. And I would even hear friends and allies very high up in the conservative movement saying, James, I'm glad that Heartland is having this cooperation in Europe with ICA, with members of parliament, with the European Conservative based right here in Vienna. But you have to be careful. You don't want to associate with the Hungarian conservatives. You don't want to associate with the Austrians, because these are far-right Nazis. When you hear these horrible things about Donald Trump, and look, people can have different opinions, but what you get in the American media is the worst slant on this man that they can put in play. And then the European media takes that and puts an even worse slant on that. It used to be that the Republican Party, who were the nominees before Donald Trump? John McCain, we would all have global carbon taxes and cap and trade. Mitt Romney, global carbon taxes and cap and trade. Before that, George W. Bush, not quite so bad, but not very good. The change that's occurred is embodied in Donald Trump. For all of his personal characteristics that can be troubling. Donald Trump can be narcissistic. Donald Trump can engage in bad behavior. The thought in America is this. For someone that's my age or older, Jimmy Carter was president in the 1970s. He had been a former Sunday school teacher. He was seen as just a wonderful guy. And yet, under Jimmy Carter, under his policies, America had a very difficult time. We had George W. Bush, who was a very religious and pious man, and yet we saw the policies. Whether we like Donald Trump's personality or not, it's under Donald Trump that America pulled out of the Paris Climate Agreements. It's under Donald Trump that we had a rolling back of regulations on conventional energy. He is coming back, and it's going to be wonderful with the momentum we see in Europe for the conservative movement, true conservative movement, and truth in energy, climate policy. We're going to have quite a coalition forming. So I look forward to working with everybody here in Europe on that. Now, a few points on just on the science here. We're going to hear from so many scientists over the next 2 days and so much incredible information. But a few things really jump out at me. Just in the past week, preparing for this talk, and really even before preparing for this talk, some items in the news jumped out at me that illustrate how we are being lied to by the media. They call climate realists like ourselves in this room disinformationists, peddling climate lies. But let me show you who's really telling the truth and who's telling lies. So this is a graph. This is published by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and it's regarding the state of Texas. And what it is the number of extremely hot days. What they did is they charted, going back on the far left is the year 1900. And then in 5-year increments, each bar going up is a 5-year period. How many days in Texas did temperatures exceed 100 degrees? So there you have on the far left in the early half of the 20th century. On the far right, you see the number of days topping 100 degrees in the past 50, 60 years. What does that tell you? What do you read from that? Does it strike you that we're getting more hot days in Texas here as climate change occurs? Does it strike you that there's some crisis that is driving people to die from heat, or that's going to push energy usage too high because we have too many hot days? No, it's exactly the opposite. 9 of the past 10 5-year periods, tracked by NOAA, we have below average number of very hot days. That's the truth. That's the fact. That's from the United States National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. This chart is cut and pasted from their own website. Now here's the media. And worse yet, our government officials, our bureaucrats. This is an article from Texas A&M University. Texans should prepare for hotter temperatures, greater risk of fire and flooding. The subtitle, a new Texas A&M climate report shows a dramatic rise in 100-degree days. It goes on for other points. A dramatic rise, they say. How do you get that? How do you get that from this chart? But because you have a bureaucrat at a state university that's funded by your tax dollars, whose job probably wouldn't exist without the perpetuation of a climate crisis, this data means nothing to the media. But this report from the bureaucrat means everything. Remember, check the facts. And the media is not always going to tell you the truth. Okay, here's some more data. What does this mean to you? This is coffee production globally. On the left, you have coffee production in the year 2001, and then you have annual coffee production globally through 2022. This data is provided by the website Statista. What does that tell you? Is coffee production declining? Is it getting decimated by a climate crisis? No, it's exactly the opposite. You see new records set virtually every year. You see a trend that is inexorably going up. Now here's what the media tell us. This is the Wall Street Journal, published just this week. Here's the headline. Climate change is coming for the finer things in life. Wine, olive oil, coffee, cocoa. It does feel a little apocalyptic. The article goes on. Here's a part of the article. Traders are hoarding coffee after a severe drought in Vietnam, the world's second largest producer, pushing prices of the Robusta variety to a 45-year high. The more coveted Arabica beans have also recently become costlier. What they do is they say, okay, the price of coffee is up, therefore it's climate change. But we know it's not the case. We know it's exactly the opposite. Coffee production is doing phenomenally well as we have more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, as we have modestly more warming, as we have more precipitation. The reason why prices are going up is because Joe Biden and just about every other country in the world responded to COVID by shutting down businesses, borrowing money, printing money, and having inflation across the board. Climate change is a scapegoat for failed policies from loser politicians. Don't let these media articles tell you different. If you don't look at the facts, if you're not connected with CFACT and CEI and the Heartland Institute, you're going to believe this rubbish, which has nothing to do with climate change. All right, here's another one. What does this study say? Here's the headline. Early aerial expedition photos reveal 85 years of glacier growth and stability in East Antarctica. This is a peer-reviewed study, Nature Communications. And here we have the findings. I'll jump down to the bottom where we get to the heart of the matter. In all regions, the long-term changes in thickness correspond with trends in snowfall since 1940. Our results demonstrate that the stability and growth in ice elevations observed in terrestrial basins over the past few decades are part of a trend spanning at least a century and highlight the importance of understanding long-term changes and interpreting current dynamics. A team of scientists, they discovered photographs, extensive photographs taken over Antarctica in the 1930s. Back then, a team of scientists flew throughout much of Antarctica over the continent. They took photographs. And Antarctica is a very mountainous continent. You can see the height of the ice and snow juxtaposed against the mountains. Going back, looking at current satellite imagery and photographs, they found that, well, the snow and ice pretty much everywhere in Antarctica rises higher than was the case during the 1930s. 90 years of global warming, and what are we getting? And the reason you see right here corresponds with the trends in snowfall since 1940. With modestly warmer temperatures, still substantially below zero, the Antarctic ice sheet is not melting, you have more snowfall. You have a growth in snow and ice throughout the continent. So that's the study. And by the way, it's nothing new. Here's another study published in 2015, mass gains of the Antarctic ice sheet exceed losses. And when you look at the authors, by the way, you see at the bottom J.W. Robbins from NASA. So we have NASA scientists that documented back in 2015 the same thing. We have multiple studies showing that there is an increase in snow and ice in Antarctica. Now, this is a group called factcheck.org. This past week, they were very upset because we at the Heartland Institute pointed out what is happening in Antarctica. And so their headline, Antarctic ice loss is significant, contrary to claims. By the way, the person who called us, if I recall correctly, this Kate Yandel, was, as best as we could tell, a very young, just out of college reporter who didn't have much knowledge on the topic. That's often the case when people contact us for fact checks. We're not getting these learned scientists. We get someone that basically is told to, well, listen to what the NASA bureaucrats say. Doesn't matter that the NASA scientists themselves document an increase in snow and ice. And so here's a quote from her story. A popular video from the Heartland Institute, which has a long history of casting doubt on climate science, minimized the significance of Antarctic ice loss, and then questioned whether it's happening at all. We're not casting doubt on any science. We're presenting science. You have peer-reviewed studies published in the peer-reviewed literature that say we are seeing an increase in snow and ice. Now, at best, if you're on the other side, maybe you can find some garbage studies of your own, and then you could say, well, there are different studies. Which one do we believe? But here they're saying the Heartland Institute casting doubt on climate science. What an absolute joke we are being fed. Again, don't listen to what the media tell you. Don't listen to what government bureaucrats for NASA, NOAA, or anywhere else say. Their data contradicts what they say in public. because NASA, NOAA gets tremendous funding that goes away the moment the notion of a climate crisis goes away. But go to the facts, go to the evidence. Now, these are just a few items that popped up just in the past week or so that I came across. This happens on all sorts of other topics. But again, the science is on the side of climate realism. And by the way, I understand that we have some press in the room, and I guess we're videotaping, so maybe this will turn out on the internet. If there's any prominent climate scientist with NASA, with NOAA, if there's somebody who holds a comparable position to myself, if there's the president of Greenpeace or the World Wildlife Fund or anyone else who wants to challenge this, who wants to challenge what we present, I'm going to make you an offer right now. We have each year at the Heartland Institute, as is the case for most non-governmental organizations, we have an annual benefit dinner. This is where our biggest supporters, donors, friends of Heartland come together, and we have an evening, we put on a presentation, we have speakers, we have a nice dinner. I will invite any prominent scientist from NASA or NOAA, I say scientist, bureaucrat scientist, or any president of Greenpeace or WWF or anyone else. How about this? Come to the Heartland Institute's annual benefit dinner. Let's debate, you and I, this science, any climate change topic you want. All you have to do is show up, win a debate, and all of our donors go away, and the Heartland Institute ceases to exist. That's my offer, for free. Come on and debate the science. Rather than getting these journalists, I'll keep it at that, to parrot your talking points and talk about science denialism and attacking science, come up and put your money where your mouth is, because the science is on our side. So I gave a few examples of the true disinformation in the climate science debate. If I were to summarize the climate change issue in one slide, it's this. And if I were to make one point that I want you to remember, it's this. There cannot be a climate crisis when temperatures are unusually cold, not warm. There cannot be a climate crisis when temperatures are unusually cold. The whole premise of a climate crisis is global warming is baking the planet and causing all these harms. This chart, this is data from the Greenland Ice Core project. It was published by the European Science Foundation. And what you see is a temperature history of the Earth. I want to point out the one at the top right is most important. The top right chart, on the left of that chart is 10,000 years ago, temperatures. On the right are temperatures today. What you see is that for most of the past 10,000 years, for most of the period that human civilization has existed, temperatures have been significantly warmer than today. Do you see that little squiggly line, the squiggly line at the end that goes up? That's all of the warming of the past 150 years. That's what we're told to lose our minds about. That's what we're told is destroying humanity and the planet. Even with all that warming, we are still unusually cold. Yes, temperatures have warmed a little bit. They've warmed from the coldest period of the past 10,000 years. It's a good thing temperatures are warming. But again, when they say, oh, we're going to have the entire Antarctic ice sheet melt, why didn't that happen 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 years ago when temperatures are warming? All these other things they say are going to happen, why didn't it happen then? You cannot have a climate crisis when temperatures are unusually cold. This is cut and pasted, these charts from the United Nations' very first climate assessment report. The middle chart is the same as what we saw that I just showed you. Here, the United Nations itself documents the same thing. For most of the past 10,000 years, temperatures have been warmer than today. That's most of the period that human civilization existed with far less technology than today. And here, the United Nations shows the little squiggle at the end. That's what we're being told is a crisis. It's simply not the case. So, if you are interested in this data that I just presented, this is Climate at a Glance for teachers and students. Get this book. It's available on Amazon. It's available climateataglance.com for free, a digital copy. So you can get the hard copy on Amazon. These are 2-page summaries on hurricanes, tornadoes, temperature history. They won't make your eyes glaze over. They're easy to understand. They're illustrated with charts like I just showed. In fact, on your cell phone right now, you can get the app, either for Apple or Android, Climate at a Glance app. You'll have it at your fingertips whenever you need it. So I encourage you to do that. And finally, climaterealism.com. At the Heartland Institute, each day we look at what the media is presenting to us in their climate disinformation that they accuse us of. Here, for example, here's a screenshot from just a couple days ago. The Wall Street Journal's left turn on climate change is unjustified. The finer things in life are widely available. So we took apart, I presented the coffee information. We put a short article on there. We documented for coffee, for wine, for chocolate. It's all the same. We're told climate change is destroying them. Production is reaching records virtually every year. All right, so folks, let me just conclude with this. It really is an inspiration to be here, especially this week after your elections last week, especially here in Austria where you have Harold Volymsky and Roman Heider who are fighting for you and fighting for climate truth. When people want you to get discouraged because all the media is on the other side, because your teachers and your schools are all on the other side, still, people are intelligent and discerning. In the end, truth will prevail. Thank you very much. Thank you.